And the first one is Todd Gordon, or whoever booked you in 1992 for Eastern Championship Wrestling. Who was the guy giving you the match finishes and what you were going to do?
It was Todd Gordon that was kind of like, not really the booker, but the promoter, but obviously booked the matches and stuff like that. As far as finishes and other things, I can't recall that first match, that real barn burner that was like literally a 20-minute squash with me hanging on versus Jimmy Cianetti. Went to a draw, which was a rib, either by the office or the boys or whatever to test me. And it was Steve Richards, not Stevie Richards versus Jimmy Cianetti. Michael Jack Sports Bar, February 25th, 1992. Not today, CTE. I got to say, one of the boys gave the finish to the match. And dare I say it, it may have been Jimmy Cianetti, who was one of my trainers. So we had a thing where the wrestling school, which was Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, previous to them going out of business and then coming back as Eastern Championship Wrestling, Joel Goodhart ran TWA for years. Then Todd Gordon started Eastern Championship Wrestling, and basically from that point on, it was kind of DC Drake was there, Johnny Hotbody, Larry Winters, and then my match with Cianetti in that first show. I think Jimmy was kind of like the person telling me what to do and everything, and then deferring to people that were the trainers at the school, which were, I guess, de facto kind of agents in a way. But there was no like one booker until Eddie Gilbert came in for that initial thing right there later on. Eastern, Paulie was a personality, and then it morphed over into Paulie booking and then Extreme Championship Wrestling. That's the Cliff Notes. But I was such a scared kid. Like, anybody that was telling me anything to do, I was listening. I didn't even know. But I feel like most of the communication was Jimmy Cianetti telling me what we needed to do for the match, which was really just bump and sell, kid, and then hang on. And trust me, 20 minutes, even if you have no clue about pro wrestling, I was aware enough to know 20 minutes was the deep end to start out with.
So, Todd, over the course of ECW and your time there, did he ever book? Did he ever offer storylines or suggestions kind of thing?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm sure he did. And even in the Extreme Championship Wrestling with Paulie, there were certain things that Paulie, and obviously Todd had people that were favored by him. So he was trying to get them booked, trying to get them maybe not featured on TV, because ECW is definitely a meritocracy in a lot of ways. You either succeeded or failed. It was not a political environment. It was literally, if you're not good, and then if you're really not good and the fans are reacting to you, Paulie would twist that into something to turn that negative into a positive. But Todd definitely had, I would say Todd, this is my guess, and I wish I spoke to him before this question, my guess would be towns promoting money type stuff, since he was literally the guy funding the promotion at that time. So he would obviously need to be heard with ideas, even just as a courtesy, to see what he thought he wanted to put out there.
Can you assign a ranking to Todd?
I don't think so. I think that, though, without Todd Gordon, there wouldn't even be an ECW. There would need to be an Eastern before an Extreme. He's the one that brought Eddie Gilbert in. He's the one that brought Paul Heyman in. So without him being the linchpin to start it, we would have got like the NWA like territory, and that would have went absolutely nowhere. And that was a point there too. Todd and Dennis Carluzza and Paul Heyman, I don't know. That's an interesting deep dive, even with that situation. That Shane, actually the person I stole the show from. Sorry about that. Shane would probably be able to speak more because he was probably in some of those meetings with that. Am I off base with that?
No, I think you're more or less right there. You can't speak on Eddie Gilbert because he was there and then taken out, or was he, before you even returned?
I was not even there. 94, I worked those Terry and Dory Funk and got pinned with the headlock, which you love me bringing up. I have to say he wasn't there, and Paul's the only person I met, because I would remember meeting Eddie Gilbert because I was a huge fan of his work. So I think he was already out at that point.
So we're going to go straight to, and we could spend an entire episode on it, but sort of the shorthand, Paul Heyman ranking as a booker.
He's on the Mount Rushmore for sure. I would also kind of early on, unless I changed the ranking, say he's the best booker I've ever worked for. by far. You know why? Because, and I'm not talking about writers, even though he wrote stuff, because ECW really didn't write. You booked it, and then the guys figured it out. Paulie was the best booker for reasons more so what I just said. If there's a person that's not really getting over, he would still try to figure out a way to do it based on the crowd reaction, the interaction. He would turn, like, say, somebody like an Axl Rotten, who he didn't like. Him and Axl were like this. He wouldn't get rid of him and just say, forget it, we're not even using him. He would squeeze everything out of him, but still keep Axl relevant to a certain point, because Axl will be used to get other people over to elevate them. Paulie was great at bringing people in that were between WCW and WWF at the time and utilizing them as you never know who's going to show up in ECW, and then using them to essentially get the homegrown ECW talent over. He would turn more negatives into positives than any booker that I've seen. He would also remove himself. Sometimes his personal feelings would get in the way, but he would still see people like Axl and other people that he would fight with that could draw something and basically contribute to the product. How many bookers today are like, I just don't like them, so you're persona non grata and you're never on TV? Paulie would go, I don't know which is better, but, Paul would make the most out of every talent, whether good or bad, whether over or not, whether he liked them or not.
MCW, I don't know who was booking or who owned it. That's Maryland Championship Wrestling. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because you made quite a lot of appearances for them in 98 and 99 before you went to the World Wrestling Federation.
Yeah. Dan McDevitt was the promoter, the booker. Actually, he just spoke to him. He wanted me to work some shows this fall and do seminars and stuff like that. I'm considering it. But Dan would book, but most of the time, the talent that would come in, like I would help a little bit. Other people, he'd have WWF guys come in, guys that have been on the indies and have a lot of experience. Sometimes his trainers at the school, they had Bone Breakers, which I think they still do have it under that name, but they do have a school. Those are the kind of people that he would trust to agent and help book the matches. But Danny was the promoter and Danny was the booker as well. He had a couple partners here and there that dipped in and out, but they weren't really involved with the creative process nor getting the buildings or Danny was the front-facing guy on both ends of that. It was a great place. It's still a great place to work. They're still doing really good business, and they still run it like a business. So I give Danny all the credit in the world for that.
Can you assign a grade to him, A to D?
If they're still booking Maryland Championship Wrestling shows in 2025, and I started working for them when it was MEWF, before it was MCW in like 95, 96, that's a 30-year run. I'd put him up there, maybe not Mount Rushmore by standards of television and all this stuff, but one of my favorite people to work with. I think with what we're going to talk about with the writers too, the theme is a lot of these people in power, writing and booking and stuff like that, they always want the credit. They always want to be the person to come. You have to convince them their idea. Paul Heyman wasn't like that. Dan McDevitt wasn't like that. And we're going to talk about writers that weren't like that, which is a very small percentage. I love bookers like that. Todd's in there too, by the way. The whole collaborative effort. That's the word I look at and I love about Luke Hawks and Wildcat Sports. Collaboration. Not trying to, like, my idea is better this and that, but when you can hash it out and fully admit, like, wow, that's actually better. And sometimes I would come up with an idea. Luke, Danny, Paul, Todd, the writers, they'd be like, oh, well, what about this and this? And you have to be open-minded and say, oh, wow, that's right. That's awesome. Wow, we got something now. Not many people in power and wrestling can do that. And I think it's pretty obvious today.
Okay, we're going to go to WWF/WWE straight away. I think this is the guy who hired you, Vince Russo.
Yeah. I mean, besides being a close personal friend of mine, Vince has been the person that gave me my job, him and Terry Taylor together, WWF and then TNA. So, and I still work with Vince to this day, 10 plus years or more, doing the show with him. But Vince is the embodiment of that collaboration thing I was talking about. Obviously, Vince wants to write, and if you argue with him too much, and he doesn't have all the time in the world to do that. But if you can put your little personal spin on it. That's great. The thing that made Vince really stand out, and Ed Ferrara's in this too, Vince would do something that I never saw anybody else do. For some reason, only Vince did it with me once at the beginning of The Right to Censor. He would sit the talent down and get to know them, ask them questions, take notes. Not anything super personal, but get to know something, because if he got to know you as a person and your personality and your real life character, what can I turn up to 11? And then it can naturally come across the screen. That's something Vince did better than anybody else that I ever worked with. He'd take the time. Nobody else ever takes the time.
Do you know who did that with CM Punk when he got to WWE? Bruce Prichard. There's actually, and this was released on a DVD or whatever it was, like an internal interview that Bruce did with Punk to try and get his personality down, because he didn't know what to do with him. So weirdly, Bruce Prichard, of all people, has also done that.
Well, they should do it all the time. That's what the Performance Center and NXT is supposed to be about. Not, hey, by the way, we're going to change your name, do all this stuff, erase that, now act like this. That's what it feels like. And then when they get to the main roster with that convoluted, created character that doesn't fit them at all, they don't get over. And you have all the time in the world to get to know it. They're training all day. They're going to house shows. And they're doing the promo room. Sean and Terry Taylor and everybody down the Robbie Brooks side in the beginner's class, which I believe he's still doing, they're getting to know them. Yeah, it should be easier now than ever before. But for some reason, it's not. I give credit to Bruce. CM Punk might not be CM Punk if they just said, you're Icy McFreeze. We had this in our back pocket all this time.
I'm going to give you a bunch of names that replaced Russo and Ferrara from 99 onwards during your tenures. Chris Kreski, Brian Gewertz, Dave Lagana, Chris DeJoseph, Ed Koskey. Some of the more well-known head writers, or they would be at some point a head writer in WWE for the most part. Any stories or anything about any of these guys, or would it always be they'd work with The Rock and then they delegate writers to everybody else, basically?
Yeah, that's the way the system works. I don't personally blame any of these people for that, but you have to remember, first and foremost, they're in a tough spot. They're basically the bad guy, kind of like what talent relations with J.J. Dillon, Jim Ross. You're the bad cop. So the writers and then the agents are the bad cops that represent Vince. They're basically buffers. So you can't get to Vince or even get to the upper management people. There is a chain of command, a pecking order. And of course, your value as a human being is determined by your push. And your value in the creative aspect is also determined by where you're pushed currently. I was on both sides of it. So you have the Right to Censor way up here as top heels. And then obviously people, what my label that stuck with me was the exact opposite. So all these guys are basically yes men for Vince, trying to figure out what ideas they can come up with that Vince will like. That's the difference between all these people and Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara. Because Vince and Ed would push back. Vince and Ed would stand their ground. And we're talking about a roster-wide thing, not just my favorite one or two or three people. For instance, Chris Kreski was good. Brian Gewertz was good with his favorites. With The Rock, or famously Edge and Christian, who got taken to wrestlers' court for buying him action figures and comic books to be politically aligned with him, and he liked them. So basically, Brian Gewertz almost just wrote exclusively for The Rock and Edge and Christian. Maybe Kurt Angle too, when they were all in the act together. But that's not Brian Gewertz's fault in a way. You know why? Because the system, Vince and all these people, and we talked about with the Jim Ross, Al Snow thing, if you start to advocate for too many people, he shuts you down completely. So it's a hill to die on. There's the metaphor right there. What's their hill to die on? Hey, if I'm a writer, I'm going to attach myself to The Rock too. That's a hell of a hill to die on, isn't it? Because you're never going to die on that hill. You're always going to have good, fun TV. Dave Lagana was the same thing. Chris DeJoseph was also the Big Dick Johnson guy, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. Ed Koskey, who's still there, that just proves what kind of yes man he is and how he can politically keep his job. I mean, he's been great for like 20 years, and I don't blame him. That job would do it to you. And then we'll get into the other people, which is a whole nother class of, especially now, because anybody that's currently there, you're answering to all the other people. So even if you're a head writer, you're still junior to all the people we're going to talk about next. That's what I'm saying. I personally, at one point, because it's a very personal business, you have to treat it that way. We saw with obviously when we talk about certain segments, people take it personally. That's cool. You put your heart and soul into this, but it's a personal business. So at that time, a lot of guys take it personally when someone just, you're not worth writing for. I don't have time for this. But really what they're saying is, Vince doesn't want me to write for you. It's Vince, not them. But they're the ones that take the stray bullets and the drive-bys and all that stuff.
Are there any WWE writers that you did work with or collaborate with that you thought, were good creatively, had your interests at heart, and were also like good people managers as well? Anybody who
the person who wrote for The Right to Censor we did the best work together, but then at that word collaboration, but deferring to what he wanted with writing an actual storyline and script of bullet points, not word for word. People manager, you got to be a people manager, or you just avoid the people. And the writers were kind of smart sometimes to just avoid the talent, because it goes both ways. If you make yourself too accessible, now the boys are giving you every crazy idea to big shock, to get themselves over. But I morphed into a person that would pitch things for other people just because maybe on the spill off of that, they'll be like, he's pretty unselfish, so let's give something to him. He's got a good mind. But you know what ended up happening? And it happened in ROH. We'll get to Delirious. They got threatened in some ways. Too good, but don't too good. This guy's got pretty good ideas. Oh, we have to destroy him.
Well, speaking of destroying, but she was head writer for many years in WWE, Stephanie McMahon.
I got a question for you before we start. Are you tired of watching boring commercials? I get to watch WWE uninterrupted. I love Stephanie. VPN Stephanie is my favorite. Writer Stephanie, not so much. So what are you going to do? This is the ultimate, the emperor has no clothes. Her father hired her to be the head of writer, the head of creative. Do you think anybody's going to tell Stephanie that here's a better idea? Here's how I can punch it up. That's a bad idea. I'm not going to now. Obviously, Austin, Taker, Hunter. Well, Hunter, I don't know if he wants any trouble either. But do you see what I mean? There's no way you can do it. It was as the Star Wars guy said, it's a trap. The second she was put in there, it's an absolute trap. Vince Russo went back temporarily in 2002. And Stephanie spoke to him like he was in first grade. And she spoke to the other writers like that. And what are you going to do? Yes, Stephanie, yes. And you'll say it too. That was the beginning of the end of a lot of things there creatively. And then the authority came right after that. So what can you do? You just got to ride it out and hope she gets tired of doing it, which didn't happen.
Next up is, but I need to qualify this, I'm not talking about recent times, Triple H, creatively speaking, while you were there, did he have really any creative say, or was he just sitting in meetings at that point?
Most of it, well, I'm sure he was in production meetings. For years, he was in production meetings, and that's a big deal. That's not the invite the talent for a week, and then we regret doing that. He was in production meetings. I don't know how long. Hunter?
97 at least. He was in before DX was a thing.
Yeah, he was being groomed in some way, form, or fashion about eventually being in the spot he's in. So I'm not saying he wasn't creative. I'm not saying he doesn't have great psychology, which he actually does. You watch his matches, you can feel any way you want about the guy, but his psychology works. Mainly because in the system, he's allowed to display his full knowledge of psychology and storylines and have the execution. But with Hunter, this is the classic thing with a lot of top guys and a classic thing throughout eras that has not changed even up until now. Hunter was the guy, and I watched this and I experienced this. Never a reason or anything like that, but if Vince asked or something, he would just be like, are you sure? Or a straight up, like, not yes. Not yes is a no. I've said it before on an episode. Or, Vince, are you sure about this guy? Or what he would say was, this guy never drew. This guy can't draw. The very vague metaphoric type thing of he can't. The people that draw in wrestling are the ones being pushed by the company, by the machine. You need that. So I think he lent a lot more to do damage to a lot of careers or potential careers in WWF, WWE than the people he pushed. The people he pushed for were usually the people within his own group, like Evolution. The Randy Ortons, the Batistas, obviously Flair, and then in the stuff with Shaw. And if you notice, that was the beginning of this, as you call it before, this country club ass-kissing circle jerk type thing where everybody is incestuously working each other and nobody else can get over.
There's a few more names here, but they're not really bookers. Bruce Prichard, Michael Hayes, Pat Patterson. Vince McMahon, I guess, is the ultimate booker because they're all writing to please him. And then he might just screw everything up and start again. So I guess he's actually, even though he's the promoter, he's also the ultimate booker of WWE. So it's kind of, I guess, how do you rank or rate someone like Vince McMahon?
Well, I would say Bruce Prichard and Michael Hayes could definitely be bookers anywhere. And I'd say you have to still classify them as bookers. Maybe not like writers that sit down and write paragraphs and format, but they understand a format. I think Bruce understands a format better than anybody because how long was that guy in gorilla position with times and switching and making sure the cues were there? He was the guy for when I was there almost the entire time. So I would still classify, you could say whatever you want personally about these guys or whatever they are, but a Bruce Prichard or a Michael Hayes or both would be people, if I was starting a wrestling company outside of the political stuff, just strictly creatively, structurally, infrastructure-wise, format-wise, these would be two guys. And I'm talking about all the potential stuff outside of whatever. I'm talking about just based on their body of work. Wouldn't you want a guy like, are these guys approaching 5 decades or more in the business? Because Bruce started as a teenager. Michael Hayes started as a teenager. So why would I not want that experience? Now you have to temper that with what could happen, like politically, like Vince Russo and TNA, and then 2 weeks later, Bruce is taking his job. That's all. I told you I was Scorpion, that type of thing. But you can definitely squeeze a lot of creative juice out of those two guys and get a really solid roster, solid company, storylines, matches, and finishes. You got to remember, these two guys worked hand in hand with people like Pat Patterson, too. So there's got to be some spill off from that.
Let's go to some developmental types.
Oh, by the way, I wanted to say really quick,
yes.
Pat Patterson not on this list as I can see it. Pat's on a Mount Rushmore. So it's Paul Heyman, no particular order. I'll give you the Mount Rushmore right off the bat would be Vince McMahon, obviously, Paul Heyman, Pat Patterson. The fourth one is tough. The fourth one, you know what I'm going to have to say? And I don't think his name's on this list either. Kevin Sullivan.
As someone you personally work with, though.
WCW. I witnessed his creative. Yeah,
of course.
WCW
of course.
And a little bit in ECW, but mostly the way you experienced it. Sitting next to him in the locker room in the Indies, very relaxed and willing to share different stuff. I knew from afar. I knew from witnessing, watching, listening. And then on those Indies, God rest his soul, on those Indies, I was like kicking myself in the butt once again, just like the Dutch, the Al, and the Cornette thing. Why did I not just like badger this guy to learn more?
We've got quite a lot of names here, so you might have to give fairly short answers. I'm sorry. We're going to go to developmental now. So Jim Cornette, you did work OVW a good few times.
But Jim Cornette falls into that Bruce Prichard, Michael Hayes, and he really did book Smoky Mountain OVW. And if there was a fifth spot, a fifth and sixth would be Jim and Dutch in that vein. I mean, you can also throw a lot of Memphis guys in there. So if I'm throwing Dutch in there, I have to throw Lawler, I have to throw Eddie Gilbert, I have to throw Jarrett, there's a lot of people that have done great work. Getting back to Cornette, excellent. And he's a guy, too, that if you pitch something or try to punch it up, Jim would explain to you, and not even yell and scream and curse. He might curse around the situation, but not at you. Like, you know why that's stupid. This is why it's stupid. You know what I mean? But you could, and this is the thing, getting back to Bruce and Michael, Hunter and Stephanie. If you catch them at the wrong second and you're trying to punch something up or pitch something, you're done. You got a label on you. You're buried. Guys like Cornette, Russo, Ed Ferrara, who else in this? I'm assuming Dutch would be that way. Kevin Sullivan for the short little thing. They would almost be like, wow, okay, you're learning. Let me teach you a little bit more about what you might not know. And that's Cornette. It's not always packaged up pretty with a hug and a handshake or anything, but he gives you valuable information. And Smoky Mountain was successful for a time. I still see their stuff on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, rock and roll versus, oh, wow, this is cool. Gangsters. Cornette booked the Gangsters as heels, let New Jack cut the promos he cut, took a big chance in a slightly racist area of the country. More than slightly. But you see what I mean? Cornette was, in a way, like Paul Heyman, taking these big risks and chances to try to push the envelope to get fans interested.
I don't think you ever worked for Al Snow as far as Al being a booker.
No, but I've sat down with Al a lot in catering. And Al, like a lot of times, he was the one. I sat in Syracuse, New York one time before, or I think it was Raw. And that's one of the times where I was blaming everybody else but myself. Every worker does it. Why don't they push me? I'm trying. And this person and that person and blah, blah, blah. And Al he read me the riot act in a very, very quiet friendship, hard, like tough love. And he basically, that turned my entire mindset around about how I can do this, do that and everything. And for that, and obviously owning and running OVW right now, he's got to have the ability to book. He definitely has a ton of psychology. And coming from somebody who actually had to fight, crawl, scratch, and earn just about everything he ever got, he's the perfect person to make you get better. And also, like he did with me, kick me in the butt and say, don't worry about all this. You worry about what you can do, get yourself over. Eventually, they will not be able to deny you. And they did anyway. Sorry, Al.
Hey, HWA was Les Thatcher, actually.
Another person I use collaboration. I mean, he and Cody Hawk, I believe that's the guy's name, they ran the shows together. But obviously, a lot of people want the Les. Once again, I did not take full advantage of Les's mind, his experience and everything, but just sitting with Les and talking to him telling a story here and there, sharing his experience based on like the kind of match I might be working, it's invaluable. And he's a gentleman. He's a nice guy. And that makes it so much easier to want to sit down next to somebody and ask questions when you know you're allowed to ask and they're not going to be deemed stupid. Les definitely fits that category.
We're going to go to TNA now. Once again, if you can skip past anyone who you didn't, we're already at half an hour is why I'm saying it. Jeff Jarrett, but I don't know if he ever worked with you as a booker. Was he pretty much gone by the time?
Jeff was there. Jeff was there for a time, and I'm going to tell you right now, we do the and I do text him out pieces of cardio that I get in my garage gym and everything. But Jeff always came off as somebody that was somewhat unapproachable at times. Now you got to think he's running the company. He's got a ton of stress. He's dealing with all the stuff when you're wrestling and in the office and a promoter and a booker and trying to get sponsors and doing everything. So I think I was aware that his time was very limited. There were 2 times I actually went up to Jeff and just had a conversation about anything but wrestling. He was fine. But that's one guy. I was jealous of Raven. I was jealous of a few other people because for some reason I always wanted to work Jeff Jarrett. I always wanted to work Triple H. I always wanted to work Shawn Michaels. There's lots of guys, and you might be like, well, you always buried Triple H or Shawn or whatever. Doesn't mean I don't want to work with them. They're still safe workers. Jeff, for some reason, probably in TNA, because I know he owned the company, so we're not going to just have a one-off. He's going to make, you know what I mean? You try to work with the boss, you're going to get a 3-month storyline. But as a booker, Jeff, I think, gets a bad rap sometimes because of the King of the Mountain thing, and he always put himself over, and he was Superman. And there is some evidence, visual evidence of that. But once again, this was Jeff's company. Much like the McMahons at one time, didn't the McMahons say they couldn't trust anybody but family when it came to the business? That was apparent in a way.
Vern in the AWA,
Vern did it too.
Trying to get,
so Jeff had to put himself in a place where he wasn't going anywhere. Trust me, Vince. Remember Vince? I got the fate of WCW in my hands. So Jeff was right to do it. But I've never, once again, this is going to fall in line with Dutch. I never had the opportunity to really, and maybe Jeff didn't think enough of Dr. Stevie or the character, or it was a Russo creation. There's all these little things in the creative meeting after fantasy baseball that when they finally got down to it, he was great at fantasy baseball from what I heard. So I'll leave it at that.
Next name's Dutch Mantell. I'll add this first just because I've talked to Dutch so much now, that more than most people have, I guess. And the one thing that I get from him as a booker is he explains something to you, and then afterwards you go, oh, well, that was obvious. Except that if he didn't explain it to you, it wouldn't have been obvious. But he just sees the obvious line to take, and then afterwards it's like, oh yeah, how could you think any differently?
Yeah, that's the aha moment every worker hopes for multiple times. That's where you feel like you literally level up after a conversation like that, whether you work or not. Like you said, oh, okay, I got it. Dutch and I never had much like interaction outside of the Abyss angle, which lasted a long time, so it wasn't like 2 days. But I remember Abyss was his favorite. Abyss was the guy to him, and that's fine. He booked Abyss favorably, and Abyss earned everything that Dutch ever gave him with every test.
Yeah, but he created Abyss.
Created Abyss.
He created the character,
So I was just basically there by proxy when Dutch was kind of aging matches with Abyss and myself, or sometimes segment. Russo for the segments, for the vignettes. Dutch wasn't there, but Dutch was there for all the physical stuff pretty much, and coaching Abyss, and I was just happened to be there. I've never had more than a 5-minute conversation with Dutch. Most of the stuff, that's total, because most of the stuff was him telling Abyss what he needed from our match while looking at Abyss. And then I would ask a question, and he would, he wouldn't ignore me. He would say, okay, this is what and I'd say, well, can we put this here? And like you said, he'd explain something, and I'd be like, okay, that makes perfect sense. I'll shut up now. I won't say anything.
I'm going to leave out Dixie Carter because, one, she wasn't a booker. I know she had her own opinions.
I'm too old and broken down to have an opinion about her.
Yeah, exactly. We'll leave her for future episode TNA Take a Drink. Jeremy Borash. Now, I know he wasn't a booker per se, but he was, I guess, like head of production or head of sort of like an unofficial head of creative visuals kind of thing.
I would say he's a pioneer of the new style of production in pro wrestling. He and Jimmy Paradise did the Broken Universe with Matt Hardy and all that stuff. But previous to that, Jeremy he must have a production or filmmaking background or both. I'm not quite sure. But Jeremy, I've seen him a lot with a lot of that cinematic stuff they did. I think he had a lot of hands in I love the pay-per-view openings with that voiceover actor that passed away a few years ago. The very deep.
Yeah, the James Earl Jones sound-alike guy.
Those were those openings that gives me chills thinking about, like even the opening of the TNA where everybody's doing whatever and they got the satellite dishes kind of moving in time lapse. That really did step it up. And I believe Jeremy Borash had a big, big part in that. Now, history on Jeremy Borash goes all the way back to WCW. I think they had an internet show or a radio show, and that's where he met Russo during that time.
Yes. Yeah, well, yeah. Jeremy worked for WCW, but he was doing like a 900.
That's what 900. But he sat in on some internet shows as well, and I think he even did a little bit with remember the radio shows for the house shows, that we talked about before.
Yeah.
I think he had a hand in that. So he had a hand in, like, I guess kind of the new media guy from that point on. He was always ahead of the curve.
Matt Conway.
Well, I mean, he was decent enough. The only issue or interaction with an issue that I had with Matt Conway was I was working AJ Styles for the television title. This is when, like, Sabu, they did the loser leave town thing or whatever. It was from Final Resolution or some match after that where Sabu got beat, and then I had to wrestle AJ on behalf of Sabu. Something happened with the angle with Fortune and EV2. I don't know if Sabu got thrown out of TNA or if he lost a match that had stakes. And then that's beside the point. But basically, I was next in line to wrestle AJ. And when we were talking the match over, I knew what the finish was. I was obvious with that, but I was like, man, we're doing this thing with EV2 and Fortune. And I go, it'd be really cool if we could extend this and make a little bit of an angle out of it or do something to make the match mean more. And he turned to me and it was just like, it was almost like a career. Hey, what are you, a smart ass? But he was like, basically, he's like, well, Stevie, look at it this way. You should be lucky. You should feel lucky and thankful that you're even in the ring with somebody like AJ Styles. I was like, all right, dude, thanks. I got to walk away because I was just like, nope, nothing to do with him after that. Decent enough guy. Vince Russo speaks highly of him. But to me, that was like, you're being a little bit too familiar, a little bit too disrespectful, and fine, I'll do the match. That was the Styles clash that I took wrong, by the way. So that was, he should have taken the match away from me. I didn't want to feel, I didn't feel that lucky or thankful after. I was thankful that that AJ took care of me and didn't go full force down. So he definitely saved my life and my spine.
The biggest shock for me is that TNA had a TV championship. Apparently, it used to be the Legends Championship that Booker T used to have, and then they just kept renaming it. It had 4 different names, that belt. Legends, Global, Television, King of the Mountain. So there you go. We're going to have a couple more mentions. Delirious from Ring of Honor.
I had some conversations with Delirious during my off and on time in Ring of Honor. I was clued into this after a car ride that I had in the Midwest. We had a Midwest run where I got to work some matches. I got to work Mark Briscoe on one of those nights. It was a lot of fun. But we were traveling. It was myself, Jeff Jones, Delirious, and also that's where the ticking time bomb guy put the speech bubble of Cheeseburger. We were talking about that. Mm-hmm. And one more person I can't remember was in the car with us. But during that 3-day run, I was going back and forth with Delirious with ideas and everything and stuff that I wanted to do to kind of like get guys over. I even gave an idea. It was so funny because back then I thought I was old. I wanted to add, because they had like the young, what was it? They had a division or like a rookies match type thing or something for a short time in Ring of Honor. I forget the name of it. Proving Ground, I think, because I did the Proving Ground with Jay Lethal, but there was another one for newer guys that wrestled out of school and stuff. And I wanted to kind of bring that back with a character and act like I've never wrestled and I was a rookie. And I was so like, and made rookie mistakes in the ring. But people were like, my God, you've been wrestling 20 years. Kind of like goofy. But I thought it would get over as a fun kind of thing. Like I said, like maybe I got a concussion or I got dropped in my head. And then I thought I was a rookie all over again.
Well, do you know who kind of did that was Abyss with Joseph
Sure,
Park and
he had
Chris
a split
Park.
personality type thing.
Yeah.
But I would completely forego everything and act like I got bonked on the head and I just started wrestling that day. So, but I was given other ideas from more people than me. That was just a fun thing that I threw out there. But I was saying this would be great. And then there were guys I wanted to get over and work with. Jeff Jones told me after that tour that I probably buried myself and I'd never be back again because Delirious is very protective of his spot and very insecure. And I really never worked for ROH after that. So I buried myself by trying to just talk to the booker about ideas across the board because he never said it. He was nice enough, but Jeff clued me in that, dude, you just made a big mistake.
Only in wrestling. Well, it's not only in wrestling.
You can have it, dude. I don't care. You can have ROH.
Yeah. The last one, I'm gonna try and preempt what you're gonna say because I know he's your mate and everything. He's one of your good friends. collaborative effort. Luke Hawks, because he owns Wildcat.
Correct. He's one of the owners. He was the sole owner for a while. I think they have more than one person that owns the promotion. Luke was...
Oh, do you know what? Who I didn't ask as well? I'm really sorry to interrupt. I didn't include Extreme Rising. So who was booker there? Was that Shane?
Shane was the booker. Yeah.
Right. Well, we'll finish with Shane there, but Luke Hawks, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, Luke has a lot to do with Shane from Extreme Rising, so that'd be a great segue. Luke was great, but the thing with Luke is, see, this is where I kind of would say, yeah, but I'm going to do this. I'll give you an example. I was working PJ Hawks. Basically, this is the last storyline of my official career. In 2019, he wanted me to work his son PJ. His son PJ was very green. He needed somebody to carry him, but test him. Kind of, it's a very thin line. Testing him, but still teaching him and carrying him in a positive way to make progress. So he had this storyline where basically I was trying to destroy PJ because I hated Luke. You know, they kind of, by proxy, just getting at the kid. So we had matches scheduled for like months, you know, whenever they had a show, leading up to November 2nd, 2019, hardcore match on his 21st birthday. And I'll talk about the finish in a second. We back up. We worked Cornelia, Georgia, where NWA Wildside's building is. Remember that with Bill Barron's little kind of like, you know, barn type thing. So they had an pay-per-view, and Luke, and at this time, I'm literally shining on PJ, meaning I'm getting most of the offense. He's slipping over, but most of the times I'm beating him while teaching him a lesson. So in this is kind of early on. Luke wanted us to do 50-50 and action and just do spots and everything. And I said, dude, he's a kid. He's green. He's basically new. He's going to get offense, but at the same time, we're telling a story up until this November show where he's finally going to get the big win. But if he goes 50-50 all the way through here, people aren't going to think he's underneath fighting up an impossible task for a young kid that he's eventually going to succeed at. And I think it should go like this. And he goes, dude, just give me action. Just give me action. I go, no, let me do it this way. And then you can yell at me when I come back if it's not right. I stood my ground. So I'm not saying he was wrong, but it's wrong to me in that part of a 6 to 7 month storyline. So we did the match my way. And basically, I kicked PJ off of a mistake he made. I grabbed the microphone and I said, you know what? This is what you did wrong. This is what you did wrong. And that's why I caught you with a Stevie kick and I pinned you 1, 2, 3. And then at the end, I said, maybe your dad should have taught you that. And I threw the microphone down. That progressed the storyline. Luke kind of stood his ground and said, man, I just wanted more action. It was kind of boring. I go, did you hear the people? They were chanting for PJ to fight back. Then I caught him. Then I was a prick and said what I said to further it, that they said, the next time PJ wrestles this guy, we hope he kicks his ass. And he kind of went, well, I kind of see what you're saying, but I still wanted action. I go, well, agree to disagree. That's where I pull out my knowledge and card to say I have more experience with that. Luke can outperform me physically. He's a much better athlete. He's much more impressive. And I'm going to say it right now, and I always say it, he never got the chance he deserved in the business. He had the look. He could cut a promo. He was intense. He was kind of counterculture. Like ECW would have scooped Luke Hawks up right away. He was that kind of guy. Now, some of the people in the business, at the time, he rubbed the wrong way because he was so convincing. Shane Douglas in Extreme Rising was one of those guys at the time. Those guys, not today, right there, back then.
And we'll finish off. Well, there you go. That's a wonderful segue, as you said. Shane Douglas, who was the booker of Extreme Rising, the short-lived promotion that I remember at the time Shane was really, really high on, and then I think everybody realised just how expensive running even a small wrestling promotion can be. But as a booker, Shane.
Very, very good. In that vein, and I use collaboration once again. The problem Shane had with Extreme Rising wasn't a creative thing, wasn't storylines. He had plenty to go off of. The fact that I was kind of getting a resurgence in a way, at least temporarily, with that company. Lots of other people, new people like Luke Hawx, who was going to be, in my estimation, if it continued, would have been the biggest heel in the company. Guys like Sabu, Sammy, you had a mix of every level and every experience within the business. New guys, veterans, legends, people that might not be able to work, could be personalities. Joel Gertner on commentary was, he was, how should I say? He was an underrated, like necessity. He got everybody, especially me, over. And how Joel doesn't have a commentary job. I'm not talking about like heel Joel Gertner with the bow tie. I'm talking about a guy like a Mike Tenay type guy. That's who he was. He was really, really good. An unsung hero of the promotion. But Shane's booking right there was really, really good because he knew everybody. And the people he didn't know, he kind of relied on what they could do and let them go out there. Luke was kind of one of those guys. But then again, Luke had some problem with Shane previous to Extreme Rising that I don't remember right now. So they were constantly at each other. And I remember the tournament where I beat Luke in not the first round, but the first match that night. And then Rhino and I were in the finals. I wanted Luke to win the title. I said, me as a babyface champion, feel good moment that night. Where are we going to be a month or two from now? And people are going to go, well, it's just an old guy or just another ECW guy and Shane's booking his friend to be champion or whatever. I go, this is the dude that people are going to want to come and see his ass get kicked because you don't even like him. So I was politicking to not win the title that night as him and Shane are like daggers through each other's eyes. You know what I mean? And I'm in the middle going, no, I believe it. And they're just thinking about, I hate this MFer, But Shane still, at the same time, he didn't want to get rid of Luke. He didn't, at least I didn't think so. He still wanted Luke to be booked and be there. It was just a very tenuous circumstance. And that's why I'm saying Shane was really good because there was people there I'm sure he didn't personally care for nor trust. And keep that in mind. He didn't trust these guys to do the right thing. And his prediction came true that night. That night with PJ and a lot of other people doing what they're doing. I'm going to talk about PJ in this show as well. But the downfall of Extreme Rising had nothing to do with Shane Douglas. It had to do with Steve O'Neill, the money, and of course, the boys always ruin everything. And that's what was the biggest frustrating thing. Because there were enough guys and girls, I think, to run a very clean promotion. But if you're going to run in Philadelphia on a regular basis, you got to take that chance.
Just to reiterate, can you give us the Mount Rushmore I had? Kevin Sullivan, Vince McMahon, Paul Heyman, and Pat
Correct.
Patterson.
Yes.
Sound right?
Absolutely. Not in any particular order, but if you're going to go with an order, I would say Vince McMahon, Pat Patterson, Paul Heyman, and then the fourth one, was Kevin Sullivan. And that is like... The only reason I put Vince and Pat is because look at the business they did. Look at the stuff they did on the biggest stage of them all for many, many years. Paul Heyman and Kevin Sullivan, I would put them at a 3A, 3B. Because you have to think they work together so much too. So their philosophies for the kind of, and I think Kevin Sullivan, I believe it. Paulie never said it. Kevin Sullivan influenced Paul in ECW a lot. That's my guess. Did he ever tell you that?
I'm not sure he ever told me that. I just thought it was really obvious.
No, I mean,
because he just kept going
Kevin
back
would
and
never
forth.
say, I influenced, I did, I mean, Well, but if he was talking about certain things, you probably would be like, yeah, that's ECW.
Yeah.
When you're playing the devil in a Bible belt, it's kind of extreme.
I was going to say, because, I think Dutch or some other people would say that Memphis actually influenced Paul Heyman more than anyone, and that Memphis doesn't really get the credit for it. Because Memphis was doing some hardcore stuff back in even the 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
So, and he was there. He was in Alabama. He was briefly in the AWA, I think. But yeah, I think he got quite a lot of stuff from down south. and then took it back to
Paul
Philly.
would be smart to do what I tried to do throughout my career, except for being like intimidated by people like Kevin Sullivan and not going up to get the information. But Paul probably was an amalgamation of all the influences from day one. You utilize all that. I just mean it wasn't solely Kevin Sullivan, but I'm sure, dude, he did a promo and Raven wanted to do it anyway. They were of the same hive mind. Remember when we were in the Florida Ocean at nighttime and I was doing the purple haze running around? That was Paul and Raven recounting what Kevin Sullivan did.